Assalamu alaikum, I'm Aisha and you're watching Samaa News. Here are today's headlines. Security forces have killed 12 terrorists during operations in Balochistan's Karan district, foiling what they described as an attempted hostage situation. The military said the attackers targeted a police station and 2 banks before being driven back, adding that a sanitization operation is continuing in the area. Iran's deadly crackdown appears to have broadly quelled protests for now, as state media reported more arrests on Friday in the shadow of US threats to intervene if killing continues. After President Donald Trump's repeated threats of military action against Iran in support of protesters, fears of a US attack have retreated since Wednesday. US allies, including Saudi Arabia and Qatar, conducted intense diplomacy with Washington this week to prevent a US strike, warning of consequences for the wider region that would ultimately impact the United States. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has urged US President Donald Trump to postpone any American military strike on Iran. A senior US official said Netanyahu made the request during a phone call with Trump. At the same time, key US partners, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Oman and Egypt, have been urging Washington not to attack Iran. Officials from these countries warned that a US strike could ignite a wider regional conflict. Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado has given her Nobel Peace Prize medal to US President Donald Trump during a White House meeting, in a bid to influence his efforts to shape her country's political future. A White House official confirmed that Trump intends to keep the medal. Machado, who described the meeting as excellent, said the gift was in recognition of what she called his commitment to the freedom of the Venezuelan people. On the other hand, the US Energy Department is weighing a plan to swap heavy Venezuelan oil for US medium sour crude to refill the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. According to reports, the proposal would move Venezuelan crude to storage at Louisiana's offshore oil port, while US crude would go directly into reserve tanks, using an exchange mechanism the government has used before. Also, thousands of Cubans have rallied outside the US Embassy in Havana against what they called US aggression after a US military operation in Venezuela that captured Nicolas Maduro and killed 32 Cuban officers. President Miguel Diaz-Canel, speaking in military uniform, urged unity against pressure from Washington as tensions between the two governments deepen. Moreover, Trump has threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act to deploy military forces in Minnesota after days of angry protests over a surge in immigration agents on the streets of Minneapolis. Trump's latest threat came a few hours after an immigration officer shot a Venezuelan man who the government said was fleeing after agents tried to stop his vehicle in Minneapolis. The man was wounded in the leg. President Volodymyr Zelensky says a Ukrainian delegation is heading to the United States for talks on security guarantees and a post-war recovery package. He said Kiev hopes the documents could be signed on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos, as Ukraine seeks clarity on Russia's position toward US-backed peace efforts. A new Palestinian committee tasked with governing Gaza has held its first meeting in Cairo. Mediators say the body will be led by former Palestinian Authority official Ali Shath. The meeting comes as the United States moves ahead with Phase 2 of its Gaza plan, aimed at setting up a transitional technocratic administration. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has told Chinese leader Xi Jinping that their two countries are forging a new strategic partnership that promises historic gains by leveraging on each other's strengths. The first Canadian Prime Minister to visit China since 2017, Carney was on a mission to rebuild ties with Canada's second-largest trading partner after the United States, following months of diplomatic efforts to resolve earlier tension. A South Korean court has sentenced former President Yoon Suk-yeol to 5 years in prison on charges that included obstructing attempts by authorities to arrest him following his failed bid to impose martial law in December 2024. The Seoul Central District Court found Yoon guilty of mobilizing the Presidential Security Service to block authorities from executing an arrest warrant to investigate him for his martial law declaration. The 65-year-old former prosecutor was also found guilty of charges that included fabricating official documents and failing to follow the legal process required for martial law, which has to be discussed at a formal cabinet meeting. And a landmark treaty to protect the world's high seas comes into force on Saturday, ending nearly 2 decades of negotiations. The agreement will legally bind more than 80 countries to conserve marine biodiversity in international waters. Environmental groups say the pact is a key step toward protecting 30% of the world's oceans by 2030. That's all for now. For more updates, visit www.samaa.tv. Thank you for watching Samaa News.